With advanced English acquisition, learning English is as easy as ABC. Today we're looking at Track C, Conversational English. This is Video 1, an introduction. In the box on the left, that's the information zone. The blue box, that's where we'll find some interesting questions. And the black box, that's for videos and information.
Hi, my name is Jock Howson and I'm from 4c.com. Welcome to my Thinking English YouTube channel and welcome also to AEA, Advanced English Acquisition. Today we are looking at Track C, Conversational English, and this is Video 1, an introduction to the ideas behind our coaching in conversational English. For many English learners, there's a great sense of disappointment that, even after years of study and hours in a classroom or in front of their computer screen, they do not feel comfortable or competent in free-form English engagement, what we call conversational English. There are two reasons why this is true. The first is that whether you're in a class or reading a book, the English you are taught is rules-based English. It has to be. You have to be able to understand the rules of English to be able to use it at all. It's nobody's fault, it's just the way things have to be. Unfortunately, conversational English is not rules-based. That's why we call it free-form. It still has to be comprehensible, but unfortunately that rule generally applies between two native speakers, and sometimes not even then. I remember when I lived in Ireland, an English-speaking country, there were several people in the local village who could speak to me in English, and I simply couldn't understand anything they said. Dialect and pronunciation issues like these are just some of the problems with conversational English. And that gives us the second reason why conversational English is so difficult. No matter how much you practice, no matter how much time you spend on it, there will always be new challenges to overcome. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, and it doesn't mean we can't improve. And that's what AEA Track C is all about. We can't teach you to suddenly become an expert conversationalist in English, but we can teach you how to think about the problems, and how to face the challenges, and how to toss the English rulebook aside and get to grips with the reality of English as she is spoken. So, let's get on with it. Let's try to answer the question below: why is conversational English so difficult?
So, an interesting one. Why is conversational English so difficult? Well, here on the left are just some of the problems and challenges which we face. Elision, speed, colloquialisms, phrasal verbs, accent, structure, and differences. Everyone is different. Every culture is different. Every local area is different. There are many factors which can cause conversational English to be a bit of a problem. And here is just a very simple example. So here are two very simple and very similar questions. How did you do that? And how do you do that? How did you do that? How do you do that? Very simple questions, but with quite different meanings. And what we're looking at here for these particular sentences is we're looking at the problem areas of elision and speed. Speed, I'm sure you understand. Elision is more of a technical term. So let's have a very quick look at that. What you'll find throughout these videos is that every so often we revert to a blue screen. When you see a blue screen, feel free to pause the video and read through the material that's there. We don't usually have time to go through this information in very much detail. And that's true here. Here is an overview and definition of elision. You don't need to worry too much about the technicalities, but elision is something which we all do. Elision is something which happens all the time. So we have to be prepared to work with it. Now then, let's have a look at these two sentences. How did you do that? How do you do that? Let's look at the first one. When we say it properly, when we say it in classroom English, we say, how did you do that? But 9 times out of 10, in general conversation, we would say something like, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? So not, how did you do that? But something like, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? Let's have a look at the next one. How do you do that? How do you do that? How'd you do that? How'd you do that? How'd you do that? Again, very different from classroom English. How do you do that? Instead, we say, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? Now then, the serious thing comes in when we compare them. How did you do that is, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? How do you do that is, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? The first one is, how'd you do that? The second one is, how'd you do that? How'd ya? How'd you? How'd ya? How'd you? How'd ya? How'd you? I'm actually slightly overemphasizing those, but that just shows you that there are two very similar sentences, two very similar questions. And if we speak them in classroom English, they sound different. Unfortunately, the way we speak them in conversational English, they are very, very close. How'd you do that? How'd you do that? How'd you? How'd you? It's very difficult. It's not impossible, and that's why we're here. That's what we're trying to work with you on, is making sure that you understand these problems and can listen for them. And that's part of what AEA Track A is all about.